We're here on Saturday early afternoon. We just watched, along with most of Israel, we watched the release of 3 more Israeli hostages, and I'll try to give a recap and also explain what happened during the release itself and what we can expect to happen during the coming days. So once again, similar to what we saw during the last couple of weeks, Hamas started very early in the morning. A stage was erected, this time in the southern city of Khan Yunis. Again, Hamas claimed that this was near the house of the killed Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. And once again, the stage contained all kinds of cynical messages, also toward Israel, but also toward US President Donald Trump, which I will get into later on. Now, the whole ceremony itself was basically carried out similar to what we saw during the previous weeks. The first step of this whole ceremony is always the arrival of the Red Cross representatives. They arrived at the square that was cleared by Hamas. This time, it's worth noticing that the square was cleared by armed Hamas terrorists who very much held back the crowds that we saw 2 weeks ago, for example, where very hostile crowds came close and almost were preventing the Israeli hostages from reaching the stage. This didn't happen this time. There was more order. The whole area was cleared of the crowds, and they were only relatively far away. So the Red Cross representatives, again, they signed these phony, cynical release documents on the stage, and then the Israeli hostages arrived. The 3 hostages who were released today were Sagui Dekel-Chen, Sasha or Alexander Troufanov, and Yair Horn. All of them were kidnapped on October 7 by Hamas or the Islamic Jihad from Nir Oz, the kibbutz near Gaza, where they all 3 lived, and they were kidnapped from their homes. So as I said, they arrived on stage. They were again paraded on stage. And this time, like last week, they were forced to give short messages in Hebrew. Now, on Israeli media, they actually didn't carry the messages, but from what I could gather from media reports and also written articles that came out later, they were basically forced to tell the Israeli government to continue with the hostage release, and they were basically used by Hamas as a mouthpiece for their messaging on stage there, which of course was streamed live not just to Israel, but across the Arab world as well. So just regarding the whole release ceremony itself, after these forced speeches, everything went basically according to plan. The hostages were then taken off the stage. Here it's important to note that the hostages, unlike last week, didn't look visibly frail, didn't require assistance to walk. They didn't look well, let's say. Several of the hostages' family members later noted that they also had lost a lot of weight, but they didn't look as if they were about to collapse like what we saw last week. So then they were taken to the Red Cross vehicles. The Red Cross took them to a IDF post that still remains in the Gaza Strip. From there, they were taken to an IDF post just across the border. And they were already reunited with some of their family members. And from there, they are then taken to hospitals where they will start their rehabilitation and will, of course, undergo all the intensive medical checkups that are required after 498 days in captivity. Now, as mentioned, I'm recording this just after. This time I tried to give you more of an immediate reaction. So we don't really have many of the reactions that we usually see. I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu already put out a statement, President Herzog as well. But for now, I'll focus on what I think is one of the most important points here, which is that despite somewhat calming down the whole procedure, Hamas, on the other hand, ramped up all its cynicism and all its psychological warfare with symbols and with different means throughout this ceremony, and I'll explain what I mean. So as I mentioned, the whole messaging already starts with the stage that was set and with the whole scenery behind the stage. So once again, Hamas put on large posters of showing their leaders that were killed during the whole war. For some of them, it was the first time that Hamas acknowledged that they had been killed, like Mohammed Def, their main military commander in the Gaza Strip, who was killed several months back by Israel. In addition, Hamas, over the past couple of weeks, always put posters with cynical messages, basically provoking Israel, making fun of Prime Minister Netanyahu, for example, for promising total victory over Hamas. This time there was a very interesting message that read, migration, no migration except to Jerusalem. And this, of course, is not just a message to Israel, but also to US President Donald Trump. Remember, Hamas had basically threatened to blow up the deal and said it would suspend further releases earlier this week. This caused Trump to come out with his ultimatum that on Saturday all the hostages should be released. What happened in the end was that only 3 were released, and Israel basically announced that it was okay with the deal going back to its previous terms, and didn't really endorse the ultimatum that was set by Trump. But here Hamas sent a very clear message. There will be no evacuation of Gazans outside of the Gaza Strip. There will be no resettlement to Egypt or Jordan, as Trump had promised. But there will be, in Hamas's words, no migration except to Jerusalem, so a clear threat, on the other hand, against Israel. Now, except for the other usual things, like signing these phony release documents, giving the hostages gift bags, there were several additional means, let's say, that Hamas introduced here. For one, the hostages were brought in a van to the square, and they were accompanied by a car that Hamas later claimed was stolen from Israel during the October 7 invasion. It was a big black pickup, and they said it was stolen from one of the agricultural settlements that surround the Gaza Strip on the Israeli side. Then Hamas also gave an additional gift bag to Sagui Dekel-Chen, whose wife was pregnant when he was kidnapped, and Hamas, in this cynical way, basically gave him a gift bag to give to his newborn daughter that he met just several hours ago for the first time after being released. And finally, maybe one of the most disgusting things that Hamas has done throughout these weeks of hostage releases was to give Yair Horn an hourglass that was first put on stage, and the hourglass had pictures behind it and a message attached that read, "Time is running out," and the pictures showed Matan Tzangauker, one of the Israeli hostages, who's not set to be released during this phase. So he will not be released for at least another, I don't know, maybe a month at the least, if not much more time. And there was also a picture of his mother, Einav Tzangauker, who is one of the leaders of the protest movement here in Israel. She has been one of the leaders, maybe one of the most radical voices in this movement, in criticizing the government for not doing enough, blaming it for basically not doing enough out of political motivations, and trying to prolong the war and not release the hostages. So in this way, Hamas is really, on the one hand, provoking, making fun of a mother who is waiting for the return of her child, and on the other hand, also using her as a weapon against the Israeli government, and to try to divide Israeli society further, to increase, to really strengthen this protest movement against the Israeli government, which is legitimate, of course, and very much understandable, but also weakens Israel's negotiating position in these hostage deal negotiations and the talks about a further second stage to this ceasefire. So as I mentioned at the outset, we're filming this several hours after all of this expired. We're on Shabbat here in Israel, so there is no government activity. A large part, it's important to say, a large part of the people of Israel, of the population here, is keeping Shabbat, so they don't have access to their phones, and they may not even know that all of this has transpired. But what I think we can say, and I'll try to give you, is some of the things that are important to look out for, and that we hope that you can come back to All Israel News, and we'll keep you updated on what's happening and how things are developing regarding this ceasefire. So remember, we're still in phase 1 of the ceasefire. But towards the end of phase 1, so 2 weeks ago, the negotiations over the details of phase 2 were supposed to begin. Now, there is some kind of dispute over whether the talks have begun or not. There was an Israeli team that was sent to Doha, but reports said that it was only told to deal with technical details and didn't really advance the negotiations over phase 2. It remains unclear what the Israeli government wants to do. So we're just after Hamas has basically threatened to blow up the deal, and then in the end it didn't. But it has always seemed, most observers were always stressing that the Israeli government probably doesn't really plan to go through with this second phase of the deal, because that would mean the end of the war while Hamas is still in power. So it seems that at the moment the Israeli government is trying to extend this phase 1 of the deal. There are apparently negotiations to release more hostages even before next weekend, which is the planned next date of release. So that will be very interesting to see whether Israel will maybe end this deal sooner, maybe, or whether Israel will try to insist on the release of more hostages either next weekend or maybe even before. And finally, of course, we're awaiting the reactions of Donald Trump. Trump very publicly caused an earthquake, a media earthquake at least, by setting this very public ultimatum. Saturday by noon, all the hostages were supposed to be released, and now we only received 3. Israel seems to be fine with this at the moment, but we'll see what President Donald Trump has to say about this. And as I mentioned, you can return here to this YouTube channel, to allisrael.com, to follow all the latest news. We'll continue covering the hostage issue and, of course, all the other issues surrounding Israel and this whole region at the moment.